I think we're more united than we're not. And I believe that every individual has the right to, and the right in this case, to think for themselves. And I'm just throwing some topics out there to hopefully get you to think.
Welcome to Hot Takes, brought to you by 50cupstea.com, where united we sip, discuss, and learn. Join us as we dive into the hottest takes on culture, business trends, and the threads that bind us. Get ready for inspiring stories, candid conversations, and a fresh perspective on living a healthy, fulfilled life. Grab your cup and tune in. Let's get started.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 50 Cups Hot Takes. I'm Bill LuMaye, and with me, the one and only Jim Baker, who is also owner of 50 Cups. And Jim, it's great to see you.
You as well.
Tell me a little bit about 50 Cups.
So 50 Cups is a wholesale and online tea shop, and we are looking to take tea, which is the number 2 drink in the world, and hopefully make it number 1, especially here in the U.S. And I think the problem with tea is everybody recognizes that it has significant health benefits, and we are here, and we're going to use tea as our quest to make people healthier. So when you're sick, for example, especially when you were growing up, what did your mother always tell you to do? She always brewed you a cup of tea.
She did.
And you sat there and you drank the tea. You probably didn't like it too much because unfortunately in the U.S., tea is not packaged appropriately. It's very little tea in those very little tea bags. So at 50 Cups, for example, we're going to give you 5 to 6 grams in a tea bag if you don't order loose leaf. The traditional tea packing and what you're used to buying in stores is somewhere around 1.5 grams. So it's almost 4 times the amount of tea you're getting. And today, for example, since it's warm out and it's summertime, I brought our Detox tea, which is wildly refreshing this time of year, no pun intended, because the next tea we have is our Refresher tea. Refresher is mostly made from hibiscus. It's not non-caffeinated. There's fruit in there. There's other wildflowers in there, giving it its flavonoids, giving it its antioxidants, and on top of that, it's an anti-inflammatory. Detox, we're still going to drink some today, but ideally perfect for that late evening, Friday night into Saturday morning, when you've had probably a little bit too many alcoholic drinks. And Detox it's loaded with ginger, lemon, and other important properties that'll help your body detox. So which one would you like?
You know, I haven't had any drinks yet today. I'll save that for later. But how about the fruity flavored one?
Why don't you go ahead and pour yourself some?
Sure.
No, you don't have to do that. You can just literally pour it.
Well, thank you. Shows you how experienced I am at pouring tea.
Yeah, one thing I like is these Kinto carafes.
Oh, that is nice.
And we sell those as well, if anybody's interested in potentially purchasing those. So,
well, that is a beautiful looking color too. It almost reminds me of a wine look to it.
Yeah, exactly. If you've got a little bouquet to it too.
Yes.
If you want to
Do I leave it breathe a while, Jim? Let me take a taste. Oh, I mean, that is really good. Now, the tea I recall, and my wife feeds me that when I have a cold and that sort of thing, I got to be honest, doesn't taste very good. This is wonderful.
No, I appreciate that.
What does the Detox taste like? Is it just as good?
It's a little bit less fruity. Mm-hmm. And by the way, both of these teas are unsweetened, but it's a little bit less fruity. It's got a little bit more of a gingery taste, so it's a little bit of a burn. But literally when it's in your mouth and when it's going down, you feel like it's already doing its job as it's cleaning out your system.
And this will help you the day after?
Day after helps you the day before.
Okay.
Our body is a wonderful machine that constantly is cleaning itself, obviously, and this just helps speed that process up, so to speak, and get rid of the toxins that are unfortunately in our environment.
I know a little something about you and your background, and you know you come from a background of medical testing, and of course you're an owner of other business that deals in bioidentical hormones and vitamins, and so you're a big believer that the natural way to go, coming from especially the initial company, is a great way to go. And you live this stuff, don't you? I mean, how effective is this for somebody who's listening right now? Does this really work?
I mean, my opinion, yes. I mean, obviously tea is literally the number 2 drink in the world, water being number 1. So the Chinese, the Japanese, the Indian community, pretty much everywhere in the world, in the UK, for example, all know tea is a phenomenal drink for your body. So for those mothers out there, that have those soccer kids that are 10, 11, 12 years old that are going to practice every day and they got their backpack, hopefully their water bottles actually fill with water. But if it's not, it's probably some type of Gatorade or Powerade. And unfortunately, they're loaded with sugars. There's 256 different sugars that the FDA allows to be named different things that are unfortunately just simply sugar. Actually, in most cases, it's fake sugar. That's actually worse for you, but I don't want to go down that rat hole today. But more importantly, it's not loaded with lighter fluid. Yes, Gatorade and Powerade used to have lighter fluid in it. And they have other things that are, in some cases, banned by the FDA for other purposes. For this tea, we literally have Earth's natural products in it and water, and that's it. So I would argue that this is going to be way better for you than what a lot of these commercial drinks are trying to sell you at this point in time.
I'm amazed at the list of products that you offer online and all of the different kinds of health benefits the tea addresses. I mean, I had no idea, Jim, that that was available and that it was successful if you partake in it.
Yeah, so we have 4 different health blends right now. Obviously, we have our traditional classic black teas as well, and then we also have matcha. And hopefully, as you mentioned earlier, we're going to continue to try to bring in more products, but those are our staples at this point in time.
But what do you want to do with this podcast? 50 Cup Takes.
So the goal with 50 Cups is not only to offer a great product to you, but it's also to educate you. It's really empowering you to self-reflect and hopefully improve your lives in every which way. So obviously we're focusing on the health piece of it. And our motto is United We Sip. And I believe that we all have more things in common than we don't. And I think from a health perspective, nobody goes to bed at night hoping that they wake up sick in the morning, unless you're a little kid and you have a cold and you don't want to go to school. But the rest of us obviously want to be healthy. And I think that's one primary thing that unites us. I think there's other things that unite us as well. And I thought today we would simply look at my hot takes in life, which I think hopefully you'll find a little bit interesting and maybe thought-provoking. And at the end of the day, hopefully you realize that, hey, maybe you and I have a little bit more in common than what we don't have in common.
I love that. So where do you want to start? Want to go flying?
Yeah, let's fly first.
All right.
So
who doesn't love air travel?
It's so much fun these days.
It is.
So that's an interesting segue because I have thankfully had a chance to go to Spain for a wedding back in March. And about a year ago, I went to Africa and I flew non-US airlines. And it is unbelievable, the service, the cleanliness, the newness of the planes that you get everywhere in this world except for in the USA. And it's sad in a way because our country used to be at the forefront of technology, of equipment, cars, planes, whatever it was. And unfortunately, that slipped in the last 20 years or so. And obviously, if you've any of you have flown, you know it's not a pleasant experience.
It isn't. It is as though they have been successful in reducing the size of your seat and the space in your seat. It's a miserable experience. It really is. From checking in to getting the bag and the TSA, and then, of course, fighting for the overhead storage, which they don't have enough of. Is there a particular part, if you've flown domestic lately at all, that you...
Yeah, so my hot take is when you're sitting there waiting to board the plane, it seems more often than not now, you have the gate agent who gets on the microphone, and hopefully the microphone works, because sometimes it doesn't. And they basically tell everybody to come up and gate check their bags.
Yes.
And I've thought about that, and I thought, how do they know how many bags are attached to the passenger that's flying the plane? Because there are some days, even if the plane's full, there are days where the gate agent doesn't make that announcement and everybody rolls in there and everybody's able to get their rollerboards on, their luggage on board. Other days, though, it's like random. It's just like out of nowhere. Like, how did this happen? And so I started thinking about it. And then I really started thinking, if you really want to try to structure a behavior, so I would think the airlines in some cases really do not want a lot of carry-on. The flight attendants seem to be frustrated by it. Certainly other passengers are frustrated by it because there's always that one individual who's taking about 10 minutes to put his piano case, into the overhead bin. And I thought to myself, why wouldn't you offer check bags for free and then charge for carry-on? Now, I know some airlines do that. I know Frontier does that, for example. I know Spirit does that. Obviously, if you fly Southwest, bags fly free, so to speak. But the major carriers outside of Southwest, they do it the opposite. And then, so I don't know if they're being told by the boss, to, hey, let's gate check all these things. I just find it odd that, at times there is no gate check and at other times there is, but the plane is full, whether there's a gate check or there's no gate check. So I don't know if you thought about that before, but that's something that I constantly think about.
Usually on the 2-hour flight, I think about a lot of things. I'm wondering, do you think it has anything to do with, as you shop for low prices online particularly, and you get that initial cost of the flight, and it's not so bad until you start having to find the seat and then the bags, and this is where a lot of people are saving money by taking their bag and their purse and the kayak and trying to fit it in the overhead bin. You think that has anything to do with it, or
it could, it should?
I mean, it's crazy
in a way. But again, I mean, think about like the low cost airlines like Spirit, let's say, and Frontier. I read an article in the Wall Street Journal, I think a year ago, and you're only allowed 2 bags basically. One's just a little handbag for the most part if you like bringing handbags on board. So people were like dressing in triple, quadruple layer clothing, right? So now they're coming in, they're already probably too big for the seat anyhow.
Big to fit in the seat, yes.
And now they're even bigger,
yes.
Right? And the other hot take I have, and it has nothing against people that are large, but how does Southwest offer free seating to those that are too big for one seat? So for example,
they do that?
Yes,
I did not know that.
They did. Yes, unless it's changed, so a little caveat, but yes, they do that. So if you are overweight and you request a second seat, I don't know what you need to do to prove that, but they will give you a second seat for free.
Well, it makes me want to do some heavy late night snacking because that's not a bad deal. May I offer a tip as well? For those of you who do bring a bag on, and I do too, usually it's the bag you have your meds in. You don't want to have it lost by the airline. You go right up to the gate. Once you get up through the terminal and get checked and hand groped, you go up there and you wait for the guy to come up to the podium, and you go up and you be very nice and you say, "Would it be helpful if I check my bag?" Now, as you've already stated, they already know they're overbooked and there's not going to be enough room, and they're very thankful. They will take your bag, they will check it free to your final destination, and most importantly, they will put that red tag on it that says "first off the flight." And I think that in itself is worth the podcast today, my friend.
Well, that is a great tip if you're willing to, and some airports are better than others, but our local airport here,
yes,
you get down to that carousel and that thing is deader than a doornail for about 20 minutes before somebody behind the scenes finally hits that switch and bags start rolling out. So if you're willing to wait the extra 20 minutes to see your bag come off first, great, God bless you.
Yeah, we want to save the $20, I guess.
And the other thing that happens too is when some passengers are forced to gate check, once they scan their boarding pass and they start going down the jetway, they literally pop the tag off and bring the bag onto the plane anyhow.
No way.
Of course.
I did not know this.
Do you think every person's going to be compliant?
That's an excellent point, but I'm going to have to watch for that. I did not know that, but yes, I'm sure you're absolutely right about that. There are so many things about flying, Jim, from the lack of service and the cookie or the peanut, selection that you have, and there really isn't anything pleasant other than the fact that it gets you there a little quicker than driving a car.
Yeah, and I will say that obviously through the years, the airlines have done a phenomenal job of making travel safe. Thank God, there aren't any accidents anymore for the most part. And, when there's a minor mishap, thankfully there's not a lot of loss of life or any loss of life. So in that regard, I give them A+++.
Right.
I just don't know why they don't go back to the 70s and 80s and before that, the 60s and 50s where, the experience of flying, was unbelievable compared to what it is today.
Back in my day, Jim, you'd get dressed up to fly. I mean, you really would, because it was a special occasion kind of a thing. Now we're hoping everybody has their sandals and their clothes on when they board. So it's a different experience.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. I mean, not to get into another hot take, 'cause we could talk about that later, but nobody wears clothes anymore when they go on a plane.
No, that's absolutely right. And you would think there would be a certain etiquette when it comes to footwear or lack of, and crossing one's legs and things like that, because the personal space is much smaller than it used to be. Do you think someone will hear me? Well, do they hear my pleas? Maybe someone will change.
Well, I think also it's maybe people are too self-absorbed.
Yeah, I think so.
If you're in a row, every armrest is a shared space. And if you happen to be a bigger individual, then some people simply don't care. They just spread out, right? So now it's one thing if you're spreading out and you got a shirt on like I do today. It's totally different if you're spread out and you got a tank top on. And I got some guy that looks like a bear and he's all over me. And I paid for that real estate. That's my seat. And I almost got into not in a legitimate fight, but I got into a disagreement with somebody a long time ago. And he was a short guy, but he had big shoulders. Yeah. And he was acting like he owned the entire row. And I finally said to him, "Sir, would you mind just staying within your space?" And he said, "Well, I got big shoulders." And I said, "That's not my problem." I said, "I paid for this space. You paid for that space. And maybe you should have bought a second seat." And he called me a name, but he did squeeze himself in. And after that, he stayed compliant, and I was happy.
I have boarded so many flights, Jim, where I was fortunate to have the middle seat open right till they closed the door. And
what happens?
And then you know what happens. And I mean, I try to be kind, but I am with you. Just because you're overweight, for instance, doesn't mean that and I don't know how you stop this other than getting another seat, but to spill over into your seat, it's a very tough flight, especially if it's a longer one. So I wish I had an answer for some of these, because it would make life so much better.
Absolutely. Well, I can tell you one thing, because I think I'm exhausted on this topic now, but if you're looking to lose some weight.
Oh, the detox.
Drink the detox, drink the refresher. You're going to love the taste. And at the same time, you're not going to have the sugar, which unfortunately, in this day and age, all of our processed foods convert to weight.
Oh, I love this, though. This is really good stuff.
Thank you.
This is really good stuff.
Here's a hot take on some 50 Cups tea.
Our de-stress tea is great for relaxation, as it contains ingredients like chamomile, valerian root, honeybush, and dried orange. Chamomile assists in anxiety, as well as the ability to help you fall asleep. Valerian root helps slow down nerve activity, which promotes for anti-anxiety. Honeybush helps calm the central nervous system, and the dried orange replenishes vitamin C reserves, as well as reducing cortisol levels.
Visit 50cupstea.com to find out more.
Do you work at home? You kind of do and kind of don't.
In and out, yeah.
I mean, I do, and I thought it'd be really good. And then the wife and the kid come home, and it's a little more difficult. But please don't take that the wrong way. I love them very much. So, I mean, there's a lot of people who really want to work at home, and they are. And that's the one thing about COVID, for instance, that forced a lot of people to work from home. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the question on work from home, to me, I have a little bit of a hot take on that as well. And I think the big question is, I was on a podcast a few months ago where the discussion was the work from home a trend, or was it here to stay? And I have a couple thoughts on that.
So what do you think it is?
Having owned a company before and having had 420 people work for us, there was significant value in having people come to work every day, because you're building a culture in a company. And I think it's virtually impossible to be able to build a culture with people on Microsoft Teams, Zoom calls, WebExes on a daily basis. So that's number one. Number two, I have observed just through some of my kids, and they're my kids, so I'm going to defend them a little bit, but they certainly do work hard. But their companies have given them the opportunity to be able to work from home, and they do anything that company wants them to do. But if you're not in the office, there are half an hour to an hour to sometimes an hour and a half of time that you just simply have that you would not have if you were in an office. So as a result, you're going to go do other things. You may take a walk. You may go work out. You may go for a bike ride. You may do a lot of different things. And at the end of the day, I think that's why it makes it difficult to build this culture. And I think also if you're an employee that's doing it, how do you then get promoted? How do you eventually become the CEO of a company if you're never seen and you're only heard through a screen?
That is an excellent point. I hadn't thought about that. I was going to actually say, what's wrong with taking a walk or riding a bike and clearing your head, as long as you get your work done? But I hadn't thought about the flip coin to that. How would you be promoted? How do you climb the corporate ladder if that's what you want to do?
And, I go to the shop every day. So when I leave, it's a 20-minute ride. And on Mondays and Fridays, it's probably a 15-minute ride. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's 20 minutes. And I'm thinking that the majority of people still have the opportunity to work from home at the beginning and the end of each week, or they have the choice that they're taking to work in the beginning or the work from home from the beginning and the end of the week. I would say, well, why not just do it on a Wednesday? Why do it on a Monday or a Friday? Are we maybe leaving for the beach at noon on Friday?
Ooh.
Are we maybe coming back from the beach at 5 o'clock in the morning, but you're taking that first call on the phone at 8 or 9 in the morning when your screen is off? Like, why Monday and why Friday?
You can tell you were a boss. You can tell. You've thought this through. Well, I know D.C., for instance, the Congress was upset because those employees haven't really returned yet. And I think there are certain jobs you probably can do from home, but the vast majority, I don't think you can. Now, I don't know how you judge government service versus when it's good or bad if you're working from home or actually at the office. But from your perspective, you would say they need to be in the office.
Absolutely.
And it's accountability?
Well, I think also if you're coming out of school and it's your first job, how do you know how to learn and operate the intangibles of your job that's in addition to what your task in the job are? You have to build relationships with people. If you have a really good idea at work and you think it should be implemented, you have to go through a process to get that implemented. And if you're not used to dealing with people, if you're not used to, in effect, having to sell your idea to them, then how do you get it done?
Yeah.
Because if you're by yourself, all the time, it's really hard.
You're in a bubble.
Yeah, exactly.
You really are. But if you have the tea, it's okay because this is really good. Excuse me a second. This is really good. Although you still haven't answered my question, and that is it here to stay, or is it eventually going to correct itself where people are back in the office?
So I think it's going to correct itself. It's not going to correct itself to what it was, let's say, pre-COVID. So I do think there's going to be certain jobs, that will continue to be work from home. I think companies, instead of going out and taking, 20 or 30,000 square feet, are going to take, 15 to 18,000 square feet. So they're going to try to minimize their costs. But I think most companies, will understand that in order for me to really have this culture and have this employment engagement, I have to have most of the people back on a regular schedule. On top of that, I'm just looking at this area here, and I was looking at the skyline of Raleigh the other day. There's probably 4 or 5 different high-rise office buildings going up right now.
Yeah.
So I know some of these buildings that are being constructed right now have already been baked in the cake mix, so to speak, and now construction's going because the money's been there and it's been approved and everything else. But the people that own these buildings are not going to want them to be vacant. And so it's going to come back, I think, but it's going to be probably a little bit different than what it was before.
And for the folks who went through COVID, a lot of folks lost their jobs and were forced into becoming entrepreneurs, right? And you are an entrepreneur. Can you work from home and be successful as an entrepreneur? I guess it depends on what it is you're doing, but...
Yeah, it depends. I think it depends on what you're doing. I think if you have a services industry, a business rather, let's say you're a marketing firm, let's say you were a firm like mine, where we did clinical research work, unbelievably difficult, I think, to do all that work remotely with, 10, 15, 20, or 100 people in your company. Culture gets, like I said before, eroded. You aren't, it's like playing on a team. So if you're going to go play football for somebody or basketball for somebody, you're going to go to that practice every day. You're going to be with those teammates every single day. You're going to play a game with those teammates. You're going to root them on if you're sitting on the bench. But you're going to be part of that team. And, at the end of the day, that all works.
That makes sense.
Work is the same thing. It's a team environment. And if you have a bunch of individuals that are never together, then it's going to be really hard for somebody to pick up the work for somebody else if they have to go out. It's going to be really hard to, I think, deal with a client at times where, one person's used to dealing with them. Suddenly there's no knowledge transfer just from that intangible of going to the break room every day and just talking for a few minutes. So I think that's lost. So at the end of the day, so I keep saying the end of the day. So ultimately, it's about the team. And if your business is functioning as a really good team, then your business is going to be wildly successful.
I think that's where the emotion comes from, that you are part of a team and that intangible you mentioned. I know when I came up, it was watching people work and how they did it. Not what they told me, but how they actually practiced their beliefs. And I learned much more that way than through a handbook or even a one-on-one conversation. So I think you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, and I think what's the most effective form of leadership too? It's leading by example.
Absolutely.
And how do you lead on a Microsoft Teams call, right? How do you lead on a Zoom call or a phone call? You could say a lot of great things, but the fact that they don't know if you're going to the parking lot at 1 o'clock in the afternoon to go play golf, they don't know if you're there till 8 o'clock at night, so where people can see you and interact with you. And if you're doing a really good job as that leader, then you're naturally going to have people that are going to want to follow you. And they're going to wake up every morning feeling motivated to come to work, to do great things, not only for you, but for the company rather, but also for themselves,
right,
and ultimately for the client, whoever that client may be.
Excellent point, Jim. Well, I went into this thinking, what's wrong with working from home? Now I want to get a job, a real job. Okay, let me see if I can throw something at you maybe you're not so wise on, and that is climate change. How about that? Let me pull that. Wait.
The third hot take. I love it.
Yeah, let's do that as I sip again. Now, this is something that I'm not sure the world's going to end in 10 years or we're okay. Okay? So what's your take on it?
So this could be a little bit longer. So
okay,
let's take our youth that are in school at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
We've obviously seen statistics, read statistics, where a lot of our under 18 suffer from anxiety.
Yes.
They're stressed out. Some people blame that on the phone, social media. Other people blame that on bad families. I would say it's probably a combination of a lot of different stuff. But I think most importantly, when I was growing up, and I think when you were growing up, a little bit earlier than I was.
A little bit.
I remember going to school, and there was a big push at the time to clean up the earth, right? So littering. And I remember, I don't know if you remember, but you had that one TV ad where the Indian was on the horse.
Absolutely. Never seen in North Carolina, evidently, though.
Really?
Oh, have you driven the highways in North Carolina?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, that didn't make an impact.
Right. And he's crying because
it's a great ad.
The whole, everything's a mess. There's litter everywhere and everything else. So I remember seeing that. I remember our teachers reinforcing the fact that, when we were finished with whatever we were doing, make sure you throw your trash out and so on and so
Jim,
forth.
I remember riding. I wasn't driving. I'm not that old. My father was driving. And I literally, we'd just throw cups out, the hamburger wrappers, the bags, everything went out the window. And we never gave it a second thought. And I'm not making that up. That's the way it was until the Indian came along. And it was a very effective ad. But no, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's the way it was.
Right. But I think now,
hopefully the
late
opposite.
90s and into 2000s, we went from global warming to climate change. And climate change could mean anything.
Yes.
It could mean if we have a blizzard, the climate changed. If it's hot out, the climate changed. It's beautiful. I marvel at the branding and the marketing of that. It's phenomenal. However, the underlying theme on this whole thing is like, if we don't immediately change what we're doing, then we're going to all basically bake to death in the next 20 to 30 years. So if I'm a 10-year-old kid, for example, when I was a kid, I had hope that I was going to, as long as I didn't litter and I got good grades and I was a good person, that I'm going to live this phenomenal life and this earth and this country is going to be my partner, basically.
Right.
Today, if I'm a 10-year-old kid and I'm hearing that, hey, it's all over in 20 years, are you going to be happy?
No, and there's been studies on that, and that, especially with the fear of drowning, because of some of the scare tactics of what's going on in school with climate change. It's just a terrible thing, and how it's impacted the kids. And you're right, they look at the future, and they don't look at it the same way we did, because they are told they're going to die, Jim.
Right.
They're going to die.
So if you're being told that indirectly, hopefully, not directly, on a regular basis, unless something drastic happens quickly. And as a 10-year-old kid, what can you possibly do to change the climate? It doesn't offer you this guilt-free hope, so to speak, that you can be anybody you want. You can get married someday. You can have kids. You can have a great job, because it's all going to end. So I can't imagine what some of these kids are thinking at this point in time, especially if they're not going home and their parents are saying, hey, pump the brakes. We're going to be here. It's going to be okay. So I understand that part of it. So the bigger thing that I get a little bit frustrated is we had to replace one of our air conditioners in one of our houses. And in 2025, there's a new environmental mandate passed by the government where you can replace the outside compressor, but it's going to be changed now to protect the environment. So now you have to go inside and change all of your ductwork to comply.
Are you kidding me?
No.
That's an incredible cost.
Exactly. And so I'm thinking to myself, so I asked the HVAC repairman, I said, hey, what is that? He goes, well, if you buy the compressor, 2 of them, it's $5,000 a piece. But if you do this a year from now, double the price. Because we have to go inside and do everything.
Afford that?
Well, that's where I get frustrated, and that's why I have a hot take on climate change, not only for what we talked about before, where there's no hope for anybody, but on top of that, these people that are making the decisions can afford this type of repair. The 2-teacher salary, 3-kid family
cannot
driving around in a gas car cannot do that. So you're forcing these mandates and these rules on people that are going to have to borrow money, beg from somebody else to get the money,
or go without.
Chances are they won't, because then you won't have any heat either. So in some places, so at the end of it, so ultimately it literally makes no sense.
It has no upside for the environment either. I bet they've done no studies. If they did, it has to be almost zero. I think if you dig deep, you'll probably find that's the case. And I think and we're nibbling at the edges too, because we have all this natural resource of gas and oil and all these other products. And we obviously have solar, we have wind, and I'm all for innovation and technology. Yeah.
Changing the way we do things. Obviously, we rode horses. Now we had cars. We had dirty gas. Now we have cleaner gas. I mean, there's ways to continue to improve, but to mandate, California by 2035, everybody has to have an electric car. Well, who could afford an electric car?
Well, not only that, the infrastructure isn't there. Did
Correct.
you see the article? And I think it was in Akron, but it was some Midwestern city. Some trucking company bought into it and we're going to go all electric. All our trucks are going to be electric. So they called the power people and said, we need to be able to do this. And they laughed at them and said, that's more power than the actual city gets. We can't do that. My point is, all these mandates aren't doable. I mean, physically not doable. Not because people don't want to do it, but you can't do it. So why do people continue to push this on people that can't afford it?
I don't know. Maybe they're making money on the electric car industry or on these other mandates. Maybe they're just simply in an isolated 20th floor condo in the middle of New York City, which is loaded with concrete, which is terrible for the environment, in a temperature controlled building, and they're the ones making all these decisions. I don't know, but I do think that they've done a phenomenal job of scaring you, and all it takes is one volcano to erupt. And we had an eruption, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, where the amount of carbon that's spewed within that one eruption is 3 or 4 years what a typical carbon spew would be if you were driving your cars and your trucks around, in the U.S. for that time frame.
I still don't understand the science of it, what there is, because the vast majority is natural. Very small percentage is man-made, how it tips it in that regard. But it would seem to me, because when I look at this, I go, I'm not smart enough. I'm not like you, Jim. I can't. I just don't know this. But I look at the people. I look at the people who suggest we do these things, and they're buying, $1 million homes on the ocean, which are supposed to be flooding in 10 years. Or, you know what I'm saying? Or the industry, the banking industry. They're still lending money to all these businesses, all these homes on the ocean, and none of that has been restricted, which, from my perspective, seems to suggest that maybe they don't buy into it either. Is that a common sense, something doesn't smell right kind of a feeling, or is there?
No, I think that's true, and I think it's easier for me to do what I want to do, but then you have to do something different.
Yeah, it is.
Because I'm smarter than you are, and I have more money than you do.
Yeah.
And, to your point, I mean, if you take a look at the people that go to Davos every year, they all fly in their private jets. They go to Switzerland. They're probably, in, wonderful accommodations built into probably a beautiful mountainside. And so they've destroyed the environment where they're staying. And at the same time, they're telling the rest of us that we have to have X amount of emissions. We have to do this, we do that. Meanwhile, they're taking their private jet and flying all over the world.
Well, and I think when you look at somebody's actions, that speaks louder than their words sometimes. I'm going to write a note here and can we put alcohol in their tea? Because I got to go replace 3 compressors. I better do it pretty soon.
Do it before the end of the year,
I mean,
yes.
That's crazy.
Tip for the rest of you out there that if your air conditioner's 7 or 8 years old, you may want to think about it. I think from a climate change perspective, we really should be focusing on the climate in a different way.
How
right?
so?
Well, unfortunately, these plastic cups that we're drinking out of, phenomenal invention, by the way, but the plastic leaches into your body. It's very difficult for the earth to recycle it. It takes a long time. Instead, we tend to focus on straws. We tend to focus on making sure people drive electric cars, making sure there's no gas out there. We go after cows, even though the cow is God's creature and has been here since the beginning of time. And the earth is a wonderful regenerative process. So when that cow's out there eating, it's producing food for us. The same token, it's obviously excreting methane. Methane goes into the air, comes back down into the soil. It replenishes the soil through rain. Birds are feeding off the cow waste. Plants are being born. Grass is being grown. The earth knows what it's doing. God created this phenomenal ecosystem. And who are we to go after a cow when what we should be doing is going after the cups and everything that's used to package our food that literally gets tossed after we consume that food.
Excellent
and
point.
It's going somewhere.
Yep.
And it's not, by the way, being reabsorbed back into the earth, or it's being dumped in the ocean. Instead, we focus on these little tiny things like a straw. And then the big things like, hey, we'll get an electric car. Well, the electric car is all plastic. And to your point earlier, if we're all driving electric cars, what are we fueling the power plants with? Because we aren't allowed to do nuclear anymore, which is the cleanest, most efficient energy source right now.
Well, it's that China syndrome. That's
Right.
Hollywood that blew that out of the water for us. But you're right. If you really want to be honest about this, and that's again, when we talk about this, they never bring that up. Nuclear power is absolutely, I think France does, and they have the waste down to basically a cup of wine.
So there's a Michael Schellenberger who wrote a book about it, and he said that from the time nuclear power was invented to now in the U.S., how much do you think a square mile or a square foot area of nuclear waste would be right now?
Wow. I don't know. I wouldn't even have a clue. I would guess football fields upon football fields.
Yeah, one football field.
Really?
That's it. One football field.
All that time.
All that time.
It would certainly be a lot. I wonder how many windmills, what kind of surface area they take, and then, of course, once you have to dispose of them, or the batteries.
Right.
I mean, we're not thinking this through at all.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think
nobody's thought this through. It's
all I'm
spending
asking
money.
you today is to think about it. Like, really think about, what can I do to change this world for the better? And is what they're telling me to do from a climate perspective actually make any sense? If you take a look at an imaging map of, I think I saw one like, I don't know, maybe it was 800 to, 1 million years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And Florida went from the northern border of Georgia to Orlando. The rest of the Florida was underwater. So is that what Earth's normal look is like for the last 4 billion years? Or is it what it is now? So my point is,
Great
it's
question.
evolving.
What's
and we
normal?
are just a microcosm of time
Yes.
in the scheme of things. And I'm not saying don't do anything about it. I'm just simply saying that, think about what actually needs to be done and think about the hypocrisy of what they're telling us we need to do at this point in time, because 10% of the world can probably handle these mandates, buying all these electric cars and everything else. The other 90% will actually make this world work. Can't.
And there's a good argument to be made about taking the third world countries and building the power plants, getting them up to a first world standard, which is usually when they begin to really care about their own environment and global warming. So in a way, we're doing the complete opposite of what we should.
Yeah, and if we mandate that they have to go from nothing to solar power, they're never going to get their economy going.
Never.
And so now that you got poverty, you got sickness, and you're in effect oppressing people where they're not able to become better like we had the opportunity to do.
Right.
How's that fair?
That's a great hot take. Climate change. Hot. My air conditioner, wow. And sitting in a hot plane with all that baggage. Boy, you took this literally. Really did. I would think this is all going to go. I mean, I want to talk a little bit about the tea too, but ultimately, do you think people are going to come to a point where they can just talk about stuff without blowing up and saying you're a liar? And, and it doesn't matter what side it is. They both do it, right? Republican, Democrat, or however you want to label them.
I mean, to me, I think we live in a phenomenal society. I mean, it's got its flaws. Obviously, we talked a little bit about those flaws today, but I think we've lost faith. We've lost, sense of neighbor, and it's just words at the end of the day. Like, nobody's punching you, nobody's hitting you with a baseball bat. It could lead to that.
Yes.
But I think all we're trying to do simply is, I think we're more united than we're not. And I believe that every individual has the right to, and the right in this case, to think for themselves. And I'm just throwing some topics out there to hopefully get you to think. That's it.
Yeah, good stuff. Really good stuff. As is your tea, by the way. The first
you.
one I've tried is outstanding.
Well, if anybody's interested, go to the website, 50cupstea.com, and look for us on Instagram, TikTok, and hopefully we could talk to you soon.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for everything. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us on Hot Takes 50 Cups. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to visit our website at 50cupstea.com for more great content and delicious organic teas, and listen and watch us on all the leading platforms. Stay connected with us on Instagram at 50cupstea, YouTube, and TikTok. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends. Until next time, keep sipping and stay united.